Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good evening, 12. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Joining me as always, my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. Glad to have you tuning in to our Matchup Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Going to be breaking down all the key matchups to watch on Sunday when the Seahawks travel to Houston to face the 2-10 Texans. And of course, we've got some depressing news to touch on. One of Seattle's star players now out for the remainder of the season. So we'll be sharing our thoughts on that development here as well. So let's get to it. On Location is the official hospitality partner of the NFL. It's the only place to score a once-in-a-lifetime Super Bowl ticket and experience package. Visit onlocationexp.com/SB56 for more information or search Super Bowl on Location. Thanks for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen every day. We're available on all platforms. Thank you for your never-ending support. Now for your lead story here on Locked On Seahawks. The Seahawks snapped a 3-game losing streak on Sunday, beating the 49ers, but it's official. It was a very costly victory for the Seahawks. Jamal Adams, first reported by Ian Rappaport of NFL Network, and then eventually confirmed by Coach Pete Carroll this afternoon. He's done for the season. He will need surgery to repair a torn labrum in his left shoulder. If that sounds familiar, that's because he had surgery to repair a torn labrum in his left shoulder this past offseason. So the same injury 2 years in a row. He's had as many surgeries, actually he's had more surgeries than interceptions since the Seahawks traded for him before the 2020 season. Disheartening development, Rob, because Jamal Adams, his play has elevated and has coincided with the defense as a whole playing a lot better since week 6, that game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Ever since then, the defense has been playing really well. A big part of that has been Jamal Adams finding his groove and playing some of the best coverage that he's played in his career.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that a big part of Seattle's defense playing better here in the last month and a half has been that Jamal Adams just looks a little bit more comfortable in coverage. Obviously, he's had a couple of interceptions. We've seen some of the splashy plays along the line of scrimmage. That has just really been what has made Jamal Adams such a special player, not only in Seattle, but previously with the New York Jets, made him the top 10 selection that he was coming out of LSU. So a couple of years ago. So it is disappointing news. There's no question about it. Jamal Adams is a difference maker in so many different ways. And that would be one of the things that I would try to highlight here is just all of the different ways in which that he can make plays for your football team. You are going to lose that intensity. You are going to lose that closing speed. And so because of that, it makes the Seahawks defense a little bit more predictable. And so that obviously means it is a significant blow to a Seahawks team that is hoping to go on a little bit of a run here. And now, obviously, they will not be able to do so with number 33 on the field.
It's a huge loss for this defense. There's no other way to put it. And I know there are a lot of fans out there. I've seen them on social media today. I posted as soon as the news broke that this was a huge, huge loss for the Seahawks defense. And I can't tell you how many people were responding. Is it? I think people take for granted how talented a player that Jamal Adams is. Now, I understand, and we aren't going to talk about this too much right now. Off-season is a good time to discuss, where this trade stands 2 years after the fact. But, you can make the argument they gave up way too much for Jamal Adams, even though he's a very good player. And now there's a chance that could be a top 5 pick potentially that they're giving the New York Jets in the 2022 NFL draft. So you consider that, then yeah, it's understandable why fans are frustrated. And the year did not start very well. It was not making the splashy plays that you expect. But according to Pro Football Focus, since that Week 6 game in Pittsburgh, quarterbacks have posted a 58.8 passer rating when they've targeted Jamal Adams. They've completed just 17 out of 29 passes. As you mentioned, he's got 2 interceptions, that awesome pick in the end zone against Aaron Rodgers being one of them. They've also gotten him more involved as a pass rusher during that stretch. He's got 7 quarterback pressures since week 6. Now, hasn't been able to get that sack. That's the really weird thing. He's going to have 12 games now this season no sacks after breaking the NFL record for sacks by a defensive back a year ago with 9.5. And so that is something that has a lot of fans upset. But the big reason for that, Rob, has been that the Seahawks simply have not rushed him near as much this year. 5.8% of his snaps where he's blitzed this season. Last year, it was 12.3. So more than twice as much last year. A lot more opportunities. That's what led to a lot of those sacks. He just hasn't been using that capacity. Pete Carroll today said that it was, we're making adjustments. Teams adjusted to him blitzing off the edge, and we felt we couldn't do that as much. And it was a liability for us defensively. So they've switched things up. He's played a lot more in 2 deep safety coverages. They're playing more cover 2, cover 4, cover 6 than they did last year. And at any point in Pete Carroll's time in Seattle, and that's called playing to the strengths of your players. They figured out how to best utilize him. And I think that's the big reason we've seen the improved production in coverage. They've really been able to take advantage of what he can do, and they've minimized his weaknesses in coverage. He's not a guy that's going to be playing those single deep safety coverages very often. That's not his game, but they have found ways to maximize his skill set in that regard. And so that's maybe the biggest thing I'm disappointed about at this point is it seems like they finally had figured out how to best utilize him within the confines of the defense. Would have maybe liked to get him going after the quarterback a little more than they have, but now we're going to have to wait until 2022, and that's after a second shoulder surgery. I do think that is a concern, that you've had the same injury and you're having a surgery, and he's 26 years old to be this young and have this many issues with his left shoulder. That is worrisome to me looking towards the future.
Oh, no question about it. It is worrisome because Jamal Adams' game is his physicality. And so you are asking a physical player to try to play less physical, less intense. I mean, that's exactly what makes Jamal Adams special. And so, yes, I do think that durability long term is going to be a concern. I mean, as you mentioned, Corbin, we have all offseason to kind of talk about, and debate this draft. But obviously, John Schneider and Pete Carroll, when they made the decision to make this trade, no one anticipated that the Seattle Seahawks would have the record that they have right now, that you might be talking about a top 5 draft selection. If this was the 27th overall selection, I don't think that there'd be nearly as much concern, especially given the fact that this is especially quarterback class, but an NFL draft class in general that does not look quite as rich as maybe people were expecting. After there were so many college players who opted to return for a second, season of eligibility, free season of eligibility from college. So, I think that right now there is layers out there, and I understand that. But at the same time, to me, the most disappointing aspect of this from the Seahawks perspective is something that you hit on earlier, is that it just felt like right about now was when Jamal Adams and the Seahawks defense was really starting to kind of catch their wind and really understand what they were doing. And I think that it's fans out there to blame Jamal Adams or blame Seattle's defensive coaches for their inability to figure out how to use Jamal Adams. And instead, they're not focusing on the fact that Seattle had such different injuries at the cornerback position. They had to replace one of the most instinctive linebackers in all of the NFL in KJ Wright. They had to suddenly implement a new pass rusher in Darrell Taylor, who essentially played in his rookie season, their best pass rusher on this team at this point. And then you also have to try and figure out how to use Jamal Adams. And it was painfully obvious over that first month of the season that when Seattle was trying to use Adams as they did a year ago, the NFL teams has adjusted, as you'd expect that they would when a guy breaks the NFL record for the most sacks from a safety. And so when they did so, Seattle had to adjust. And as they have done so in the past, they have adjusted. Their defense has gotten better. But unfortunately now, Jamal Adams has gotten injured. And so it's going to be on the Seahawks to adjust. Again, the one very visible out of this is that the player who's going to be coming in for Seattle, and Ryan Neal is a proven player and a guy who does fit into Seattle's system. And so while I do think that there is going to be definitely a drop-off because Adams is just a different level of a talent, at least you have a quality player in Ryan Neal able to kind of pick up the slack.
Yeah, that's the silver lining here. Him getting 4 starts in Adams' place a year ago. He's had a year to continue to grow and develop, as Pete Carroll was saying today. He's been really doing everything he can to try to predicate his game where he's able to do a lot of the same things that Adams does. Not the same player, obviously, but they're hopeful that they can have the same flexibility formation wise with him in the lineup that they did with Adams. It's not going to be exactly the same. They played a lot more cover 3 when Neal was in the lineup last year. I think you're going to see him trending more in that direction with that switch. Maybe not as drastic as a year ago, but you do have a player with good size, with good aggression, come up and hit people. He's got some ball skills in Ryan Neal, a capable player that teammates trust and are confident in. And so in the short term, I think the Seahawks are going to be okay. It is a big loss, but you look down the line future-wise, that injury, I think it's concerning when you consider his play style and the fact that this has now happened twice in a year, that he has torn that left labrum in his shoulder. Not a good development, but he's expected to make a full recovery. Seahawks hopeful to have him back, ready to go for training camp in 2022. It's matchup Wednesday. We're going to get to the Seahawks on defense going up against the Texans on offense. We're going to be doing that here in our next segment. But first, let's talk Super Bowl. Obviously, the Seahawks and Texans, not two teams that are expected to play in Super Bowl 56, but you have the chance to go to SoFi Stadium. It's less than 100 days away. On Location, the official hospitality partner of the NFL, is the only place to score a once-in-a-lifetime Super Bowl ticket and experience package. Select your exact seats and choose from elite experiences featuring an exclusive pregame celebration with NFL legends, 5-star hotels, and food by the great Wolfgang Puck. Visit onlocationexp.com/SB56 for more information or search Super Bowl On Location. That's locationexp.com/SB56 or search Super Bowl On Location.
BetOnline has you covered all season, every season. More props, more odds, and more lines than ever before. As football season continues the march to the playoffs and the NBA and NHL seasons are just getting going, BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the sports action this season. Head to their new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use the promo code Locked On to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait for all the amazing offers available for the 2021 and soon 2022 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts.
All right, let's talk matchups, Rob. Our favorite episode of the week, Matchup Wednesday. Seahawks getting ready to face the Texans. Let's look at the Seahawks on offense going up against the Texans on defense first. I think we've got to start in the backfield, and I know running the football has not been a strength for this Seahawks team, but if you can't run the football against this Texans defense, which, by the way, is going to be even weaker after waiving Zach Cunningham yesterday, so they're not going to have the star linebacker available anymore, wore out his welcome, had some issues with the coaching staff, was suspended a couple of times, so they just decided to cut their losses, but he was their best linebacker. So you cut him. This is a team that's giving up almost 145 rushing yards per game, 32nd in the NFL. You're going to probably get Damian Lewis back for this game. At least it's trending that direction, one of your best run blockers. You've got a couple capable rookies at right tackle if Brandon Shell can't go. This feels like a game that Rashad Penny and company, and I'm mentioning him first because I just think his speed against this linebacking core that already was not great with Cunningham. Now you take him out of the picture. This feels like a game where Rashad Penny could bust a run or two. You could get Alex Collins back. There's possibly Adrian Peterson. I mean, anybody in the backfield. This just seems like the most ideal matchup because the Texans have not been able to stop anybody on the ground. So Seattle, you got to get that run game going this week. If you can't, you might as well not run the football because this is the game you absolutely should have success on the ground.
Yeah, they really should. And as we talked about in yesterday's show, Corbin, I think a big part of the reason why the Houston Texans are dead last in the NFL in terms of rushing yards is because their offense has been horrific as well. And so teams are able to get ahead and then they're able just to pound Houston into submission because the Houston Texans do have a little bit of talent along that defensive line. And they had a decent linebacker, dropping Zach Cunningham, former second-round pick out of Vanderbilt a couple of years ago, who had played both the middle linebacker and weak side linebacker positions for the Texans, had been a pretty productive player. Then, dropping him because, as you said, it does sound like that he had some kind of run-ins with the staff and wasn't being the most accountable guy in terms of going to meetings and things like that. I think the Houston Texans are trying to send a message. And so I think that similar to the way that the Seahawks tried to send a message by signing Adrian Peterson, a move that a lot of people criticized, I think the Texans are trying to do the exact same thing, try to motivate their team to say, hey, we're still competing. If you're not going to be all in, then you're out of here. And so I do think that the Houston Texans are going to try to come in and bottle up the run, and all the more reason why a guy like Rashad Penny, who if he does break through, has the straight line speed to be able to run away from the rest of the Texans, that he might absolutely play a big role in this game. I think that he's going to get more carries in this game than Adrian Peterson, and I thought it was as predictable as could be that Adrian Peterson was going to get a lot more carries in his first week in Seattle. It's going to be interesting to see if Alex Collins gets in the mix. I mean, he returned back to practice today. But at the same time, I think that the Seahawks want Rashad Penny to take the bull by the horn, so to speak, being Houston and all, and see if he can actually run away with things right here. So I agree with you. I do think that Rashad Penny is going to be the one to watch from Seattle's backfield. And then again, along the offensive line for the Seahawks, who is it going to be at that right tackle position if Brandon Shell is not able to play, which as we all expect, but which of the two rookies might it be? We talked before about the differences in their game between Jake Curran and Stone Forsythe. And then again, Lewis back at the left guard position. I think that's going to give you an awful lot more pop at the point of attack. Again, it sounds like it should be a game the Seahawks should be able to control the line of scrimmage. They should be able to run the football against the Texans.
They should be able to, even if they're missing Brandon Shell. You've seen enough from Jake Curran and even Stone Forsythe that looked pretty good in his limited snaps last week. You got to believe that they'll be able to run the football. I do think there's some reason for concern, though, with a backup right tackle going up against this Texans team from a pass protection standpoint. And you're going to have Dwayne Brown going up against his former team. Obviously forced his way out of Houston, didn't want to be there anymore. But if there's an area the Texans do have some playmakers, it's off the edge. Jonathan Grenard leads the team with 8 sacks this year, and he's a guy that was really productive at Florida. In fact, I remember you and I were talking him up in a pre-draft process as potentially somebody the Seahawks might want to take a look at. And he's been one of the few bright spots for the Texans, and he's a very productive pass rusher. So he's going to be feasting potentially on Jake Curran or Stone Forsythe, whichever one of them gets to start at right tackle. And then on the other side, Jacob Martin, Dwayne Brown's going to know him because they played together. And Martin was obviously traded for Jadeveon Clowney when Seattle made that deal. And he has 4 sacks this year. Not a star by any means, but he's got quick twitch. He's got some explosiveness off the edge. And Pete Carroll even said it today that that's a player we let get away that unfortunately has really developed and done some nice things for the Texans. So they've got some athletic pass rushers that could be a problem for the Seahawks. Tackles, Dwayne Brown's had kind of a tough season, played a little better as of late. You're going to have a backup right tackle in most likely that's a rookie. We don't know which one. But those are going to be some tough matchups to watch. And you got to be able to protect Russell Wilson to get some of those plays downfield that should be there against this Texans secondary. But you got to block first and got to wonder about that edge protection going into this game.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned this matchup just because the familiarity, just the extra incentive. Dwayne Brown returning back to Houston, he wants to play well there. Jacob Martin, playing the Seahawks, obviously traded for him. As you traded him away, obviously he wants to come back and prove that the Seahawks made a mistake that way. His 4 sacks is just one off of Darrell Taylor, is his 5 that currently leads the Seahawks. So, again, Martin has been a very successful player for Houston. And again, the familiarity. He's going to know Russell Wilson's little spin moves and things better than most others would, having gone up against him in practice all of those years. So I think that that's important. We just started off our tonight's show, of course, Corbin, talking about, with the impact of a major injury. I don't think that people should, be too forgetful of the fact that Russell Wilson, of course, is coming off of an injury of his own. And so you have to protect number 3 if you are going to be able to exploit the Houston secondary. And so I'm just going to jump right in this matchup that I really think is a critical one. And I think that this could be a game, similar like we talked about with Rashad Penny at the running back position, in which DK Metcalf could splash. You saw the fact that the Seahawks were trying to get Metcalf involved against the 49ers with a couple of quick little screens and things like that. You saw the big play over the top that led to Adrian Peterson's 2-yard touchdown run a little bit later, a big throw from Russell Wilson showing the accuracy that he had shown most of his career, and then DK Metcalf kind of just making the big play down the field. To me, this is a game in which Metcalf could absolutely have a spectacular performance. Like I like Terrence Mitchell, former Oregon cornerback, but he doesn't have the size or the speed. And certainly Desmond King, who a lot of teams thought was best suited for safety rather than cornerback, neither of them can run with DK Metcalf. Tyler Lockett's a good player, but DK Metcalf is just a different level. I think that he shows that this weekend against the Texans.
Yeah, this is a Texans secondary that's been sneaky good at getting picks. They have created turnovers, but they've also had their issues giving up big plays. One of the top 5 teams in the league in pass plays of 40-plus yards. And so you can hit some big plays downfield against them. And I feel like that size advantage. This also could be a game where D. Eskridge can cause some problems out of the slot. He's got some momentum coming out of last week's game. So I like those matchups on the outside. Even if the Texans secondary has maybe exceeded expectations, they have been better in some regards than people expected. And they've got some playmakers back there that maybe people haven't heard of because they're playing on a bad team. This still is a group, though, that can be vulnerable, especially against the talent that the Seahawks have on the outside. Does Russell Wilson have the time to do something with that? That remains to be seen. But I do think if you can get the ground game going and have play action that works off of that, those downfield shots are going to be there. Even the intermediate game, you should be able to get some separation for DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and D. Eskridge, and be able to create after the catch, too. This is a defense that has had some issues tackling at times this year. So you get the ball to your playmakers and let them go to work. I like the matchup there. From a talent perspective, the Seahawks should have a huge advantage in the passing game and really the running game as well. It's just going to fall on how much protection does Russell Wilson get? How well does the line play opening up holes for the running backs? If the line plays well, you got to feel like this could be a game the Seahawks can put a lot of points on the board. We're going to switch gears now. Seahawks on defense going up against the Texans offense. First, I want to tell you about what Built Bar's got going on this holiday season. Grab the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar or even better than a candy bar. Built Bar is filled with so much holiday goodness, rich with decadent flavor, covered in chocolate, but it's also low in calories, sugar, net carbs, fat, high in protein. You really are getting the best of both worlds this holiday season. Delicious and healthy, ton of great flavors, raspberry, mint brownie, cookies and cream, my personal favorite, peanut butter brownie. It gives you that extra fuel you need to bust down those mall doors and battle all the holiday shoppers. Or if you're just standing in endless shopping lines, Built Bar can give you that extra something to keep you going. So throw one in your jacket or purse. You never know when you're going to need it. Because it's the season of peace and love, don't bring your favorite Built Bar flavor at family parties. I learned this the hard way on Thanksgiving. People are passionate about their favorite flavor. They'll fight for it, and things could get out of hand. And if you're friends with Santa, well, make sure to tell Santa to throw a few Built Bars in those stockings. With so many flavors, they'd make anyone's Christmas morning a happy one. Go to Built.com and use the promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order. All right, let's continue our matchup Wednesday special here. Week 14, Seahawks versus Texans. We just talked about the Seahawks on offense going up against the Texans on defense. We're going to flip gears. Texans on offense, they have been abysmal for most of the season. We mentioned this yesterday, 6 games where they have been held to single-digit points. So they have really struggled to move the football, running it, passing it, you name it. It's just been an offense that has struggled. They've got a few playmakers, though. So I think the first matchup that we've got to talk about here is on the outside. You've got a talented receiver in Brandon Cooks, formerly of Oregon State. He played for the Los Angeles Rams, so the Seahawks know him well. He's got 65 catches this year, despite playing with Tyrod Taylor and Davis Mills, one of the worst quarterback situations, if not the worst quarterback situation in the league. He still put up some pretty solid numbers in spite of that situation. And Nico Collins is a pretty good young receiver that's put up some decent numbers amid bad circumstances as well. Those two going up against a much improved Seattle cornerback group There is a size discrepancy here, so maybe that works in the Texans' favor if the quarterbacks can get the football to Brandon Cooks and Nico Collins. But certainly Sidney Jones and DJ Reed have been playing really good football for more than a month. Another opportunity for them to continue to build their stock as they both head towards free agency.
Yeah, I'm really excited to kind of watch this matchup, Corbin, because the Houston Texans, as you said, have had some pretty poor play at the quarterback position. But Brandon Cooks is a good football player. And there is no doubt that the Houston Texans know that they've got a good football player at the receiver position because they are absolutely featuring Brandon Cooks. He's got 65 catches on the year, which is 3 times as many receptions as anybody else on their roster. He leads the team. It's only 3 touchdown receptions, but still, he is leading the team in receptions, in receiving yards, and in touchdowns. And so very clearly that is their go-to guy. And so because DJ Reed and Sidney Jones have been playing as well as they do, or as well as they have, because they both have very good speed, not the 4.3 speed that Brandon Cooks demonstrated at Oregon State University, and then, as you mentioned, Los Angeles Rams and elsewhere before going on to Houston. But at the same time, this is going to be an interesting matchup because can Seattle's corners play one-on-one against Brandon Cooks? Can they match up from the size perspective, as you mentioned, with the young player out of Michigan, Nico Collins, big guy who's got long arms and is able to kind of beast mode sometimes smaller cornerbacks. At least that was his game at the University of Michigan. So I think it's going to be interesting, especially because, as we just discussed, the Seahawks obviously are going to have a different player there at the safety position in Ryan Neal taking over for Jamal Adams. And so if Seattle is going to be looking to double cover it at all, then it's going to make the match much more of a difficult situation for Quandre Diggs to be able to play that kind of center fielder role. So to me, again, this is going to be kind of a fascinating matchup to see just how much confidence Seattle does have in those two corners. They have certainly been playing well, but this is a little bit tougher of a matchup, I think, than some people might be anticipating, at least from a speed standpoint. Now, staying in the secondary, again, just mention the fact that Ryan Neal is going to be taking over at that strong safety position. As we all know, the Seahawks have struggled at times mightily against tight ends. Now, Houston does not have a superstar at tight end. They've got a good young player, though, in Brevin Jordan, a 5th-round pick this past year out of Miami. He was unable to play for most of the season, but now he's played in the last 5 or 6 games and has become one of the more productive receivers for them. He's got 2 touchdowns. He only has 11 grabs so far, but again, 2 of them for touchdowns. So considering how much Seattle has struggled at that spot, considering the fact that it's likely to be Ryan Neal, as well as Seattle's linebackers, Wagner, of course, and Jordan Brooks, who are going to be operating a lot in coverage against Brevin Jordan, then I think it's going to be interesting to see how Seattle matches up against the tight end as well as their running backs. That's going to be one thing that you can expect. If it is going to be Davis Mills, the rookie at the quarterback position this game, as expected at this point, then I do think that he's going to try to pepper the tight end and the running backs as much as possible. Obviously, that's something Seattle's been very vulnerable to all season long.
I think you can lump the linebackers, Bobby Wagner and Jordan Brooks, into this equation too against Brevin Jordan and the running backs, obviously being thrown into the mix. Now, their running backs have not been great at catching passes, and they've moved on from a number of guys. They don't have Phillip Lindsay on the roster anymore. They traded Mark Ingram back to the Saints, so there's been a lot of turnover back there. David Johnson hasn't played either. So, I mean, the guys they started with as their trio of running backs, they're gone or they're on the roster and they're just not playing. It's been a very weird season. Weird offseason at that. Nobody had expectations for this team to be good, and to an extent, they've actually exceeded expectations in that regard of being bad. And so this is a team that doesn't have a lot of weapons, but Brevin Jordan has played well since he got healthy, and they've been able to get him in the lineup, and he's got those couple touchdowns, decent size. One of the reasons he fell to the 5th round, this is a guy that was getting a 2nd-round buzz for a while. He didn't perform as well in his athletic testing as everybody thought he would coming out of Miami. But he's still got good size. He's got soft hands, and we know tight ends have given the Seahawks fits, especially now that you've got your backup strong safety. And Ryan Neal's a good player, but I would expect that Houston's going to be trying to feature Brevin Jordan in this game. And I think you're going to try to get some of those downfield shots, if they can, to Brandon Cooks and get Nico Collins involved in the intermediate game where he can really use his size to his advantage against Seattle's smaller corners. I think the most important matchup, though, in this entire game Because if you want to negate Brandon Cooks' speed and eliminate the chance of Davis Mills, or if Tyrod Taylor plays, it looks like it's going to be Davis Mills. But if you want to negate the speed of Brandon Cooks, his ability to win downfield, don't give the quarterback time to even consider getting the ball to him. And I know that this Seahawks pass rush has underachieved this year. It has not been as good as we thought it was going to be. Carlos Dunlap has just 1.5 sacks. They have a number of guys that have really disappointed in the sack column. But this feels like a game, just like with the run game on offense. If you can't get your pass rush going, Houston's best player arguably is Laramie Tunsil, and he's not going to be back this week at left tackle after having thumb surgery several weeks back. He's not going to be activated for this contest. So they're going to be going forward with Titus Howard, their backup left tackle. Not a bad player necessarily, but he's not near the player that Laramie Tunsil is, and he's dealing with his own injuries on top of that. So you're going to have Darrell Taylor, Carlos Dunlap and company going up against Titus Howard. And then on the other side, you got Charlie Heck. And there's a Seahawks tie here. His dad, Andy Heck, was a first-round pick for the Seahawks in the late 80s. So you've got those ties there. But he's a young tackle that has had his share of struggles at the right tackle position. So Seattle should be able to have success rushing off the edge. And quite frankly, they should be able to have success with their interior guys as well. Houston's going to be welcoming back Justin Britt, former Seahawks starter. He has struggled when he has been healthy this year, though. The guards have not played well. This entire offensive line, the Seahawks should be able to feast on in terms of pass rushing and stopping the run. I mean, this should be a game where they are heavily favored in all facets from a talent standpoint. And I think they can get after Davis Mills, just as every other team, for the most part, has been able to, and make life rough on the rookie quarterback.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think that this is going to be one of those games where it really is too bad that Jamal Adams is on the field, because I think that he could have got a sack in this game. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Seattle sends Ryan Neal, he gets a sack, and then all the people come out of the woodworks. Oh, see, Ryan Neal is a better player than Jamal Adams and that kind of stuff. But I do think that Seattle should be able to get pressure with just their front four, because as you mentioned, the offensive line has been an area of concern for Houston. Without Laramie Tunsil, a terrific player, then they really could struggle in this game. Titus Howard is a good player. Former first-round pick out of Alabama State. I remember watching him at the Senior Bowl. I just personally have always thought that he'd be better suited to the right tackle position. He's more of a mauler, and they're asking him to be the pass protector, and that's not really his game. And then on the other side with Heck, Charlie Heck is a technician. He is not the most physically gifted guy in the world. He's a little bit heavy on his feet. He does have long arms, like his dad, Andy Heck, former first-round pick from the Seahawks, as you may name, all those years ago, offensive line coach with the Kansas City Chiefs. He is technically sound. He's not a great athlete, and so Seattle's edge rushers, the speedier ones, should give him some problems. And then, as you mentioned again, at the center position, if it is not going to be Justin Britt, then it's going to be the center is most likely to be an undrafted free agent rookie. And so because of that, then I really think that that's going to be something that Seattle should be able to exploit. I really think could be a game that Poona Ford has a big performance in this game. So again, to me, this is a game that Seattle's pass rush should be able to get home. And then again, going back to Davis Mills, I mean, he came out of Stanford. He had his own injury problems there, but he was protected by a Cardinal offensive line that was a very good one. And so he does struggle a little bit when he gets a little bit of pressure in his face, like most young quarterbacks do. So to me, that's the recipe, is that Seattle has to get some pressure on the quarterback. If they do, they should be able to win this game by 10 plus.
Absolutely. They've got the advantage across the board on the roster in terms of talent. I think they've got the advantage across their defensive line. And again, this group has underachieved this year, so they have to play to their capabilities. But with the injuries that the Texans have had, especially with Laramie Tunsil not being available, this offensive line is ripe to be feasted on. So this front four, rotating guys in like Alton Robinson, you got to get after Davis Mills. And he has shown this year that if you can get pressure on him, like most quarterbacks, he can be coaxed into making some really bad throws and making bad decisions, and you can get turnovers in bunches. And if the Seahawks can do that, you do that against a 2-10 team, they're going to fold, especially with all the other turmoil off the field the Texans have had, that their coaching staff has had to deal with. They will fold. But going to have a chance to break down this matchup more tomorrow on Crossover Thursday with the Locked On Texans crew. Really looking forward to that. Make sure you listen in, just like every other episode, 5 days a week, Locked On Seahawks. Glad to have your support. Make sure to check out that episode coming up on Thursday. Now make your second listen Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Locked On Bets is hosted by your boy Q with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. You can follow me on Twitter at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to check out Locked On Seahawks. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and the all-new Odyssey app. That's AUDACY. As I mentioned a moment ago, if you love this episode, Matchup Wednesday, you won't want to miss the upcoming crossover Thursday special with the Locked On Texans crew. Great guys. Looking forward to continuing to dive into this out-of-conference matchup coming up on Sunday in Houston. Thanks for listening in. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Go Hawks.